Hi everyone, welcome to the webinar. I'm Dr. Patrick Cohn. I hope everyone can hear us right now. We had a little glitch getting things going, but we're ready to get rocking and rolling. We should have a fun night or a fun session for you. This is the Spring 2011 webinar number 1, how to focus at your peak under pressure. All right, there's going to be 2 presenters. Basically, it's going to be myself. Most of you know who I am from the, obviously from the list that you're on at peaksports.com, or maybe you purchased some products from me. You know I'm the owner of Peak Performance Sports and author of the Confident Athlete series. But we have a special guest today. His name is J.J. Birden. He's an NFL veteran. He started with the Cleveland Browns. I believe he was on injured reserve for a year, and then he played another year for Cleveland. Then he went to Kansas City, played 5 years with Kansas City, and then finished his career with the Atlanta Falcons. So, JJ, thanks for joining us today.
Hey, thanks, Doc. It's good to be here. Appreciate the opportunity to share a story.
Great, and you have some great stories. I'm really looking forward to it. So I've talked to you before, and I've interviewed you a couple of times, but I wanted to get you on and tell your story because I think it's a great story. Start from when you were a track star, you know, at the University of Oregon. Take us through the steps that you went through to get on the football team and then eventually make it to the NFL, because it's a wonderful story.
Yeah, happy to. Yeah, I was a track athlete. I was a track athlete in high school, football athlete as well, and as I went to the University of Oregon, being recruited in track by all the different top schools, I had a dream of playing football, and all the schools thought I was too small, so every time I would go around on my recruiting trip and meet different coaches, I would always ask them, hey, what do you think about me walking on and playing football? And most of them said no, except for Oregon. Oregon said, hey, if you run track 1 year, the coach promised me he'd try his best to get me a walk-on opportunity at Oregon. So I went to Oregon and did the track thing that first year, and going into my second year was kind of interesting because I used to sneak and watch the football practices at Autzen Stadium. And one day, Rich Brooks, the head coach, I guess he got word of it. He knew I was watching the practices, and he spotted me, and he came up to me and asked me if I wanted to give it a try. He heard that I was interested, and he said, well, I tell you what, meet me tomorrow in my office, and we'll see. And then we had a conversation, and he basically said, hey, I'll give you a shot. Year, and we'll switch your scholarship over to football. And he said, if it doesn't work, no big deal, but we'll give you a shot. And it was interesting because I don't think he really believed that I could do it, but the track coaches kind of begged for the opportunity. So, but I got on. I went into camp that summer, and it was interesting because there were about 15 receivers, and I think I was probably number 14 or 13. And when you go to a Division I school and you weigh, let's see, I was about 150, 5'10", not the prototypical wide receiver in college, but I just wanted a shot. And by the end of week 2, I went from 13 all the way to number 2. I was the number 2 receiver, and I was backing up another gentleman, Lou Barnes, who was later drafted by the Chicago Bears. So I surprised them quickly, and one of the things Bob Toledo, who's the offensive coordinator, said, I never knew in a million years that you could actually play at this level. And I said, hey, you never gave me a shot, but now you know. So that was it. I ended up running track and playing football the rest of my career at the University of Oregon.
Wow, and then eventually you got drafted by Cleveland, correct?
Yeah, correct. And that's another interesting story because I was very content, Doc, with just, making the team. I just wanted to make the team and prove everybody wrong and run track. I was really good in the long jump. I had already qualified for the Olympic trials. And then I can recall getting invited to the NFL Combine, and I had no clue what that was. what I later found out is where they invite the top 300 prospects to Indianapolis, and they do a series of training and all that to evaluate you and to see where they're going to draft you. So I reluctantly went. I wasn't real thrilled about it, but I thought, hey, I can go run and jump and test and all that stuff. So it was very intimidating. I can remember sitting at a table, hear me, little no-name wide receiver, sitting at a table with Tim Brown and Sterling Sharp and Michael Irving and Aaron Cox, Flipper Anderson, all that went.
Wow.
They all these guys that went in the first round. So, but I went to the combine, and to my surprise, sometime later, I was drafted in the 8th round by the Cleveland Browns.
Awesome. I mean, just unbelievable story. And obviously, we're going to talk about some of the pressure that you felt, to be at your best, some of the pregame jitters that you had, and how you were able to focus your best each and every game. And we're going to talk about the 4 steps. But I know you've been unbelievably successful after football, and it's important for athletes to know that they also need to have something in terms of career transition. So what have you been able to do? And you and I have partnered on a project which we'll talk about as well. But what have you been able to do to kind of parlay that career into a second career?
Yeah, I was kind of always one of those that was always thinking of life after football. I mean, I never really expected to play in the NFL, so every day, every year, I took it as something very precious, and I planned for when the career would end. I didn't know it would stretch out 9 years, but when I retired, I immediately dove into the business world and became owner of 2 medical-based companies in Kansas City and 1 fitness equipment company in Kansas City. So I was very busy, involved with those companies for 9 years. I did a little bit of coaching, a little bit of training, but I'm kind of more of a business-minded person. And but over the last 4 years, I kind of made another, change from a business standpoint and got involved in a healthy chocolate home-based business called Shosai Healthy Chocolate. That's kind of been a pleasant surprise. So that's what I'm doing now in the last 4 years, just showing people how to get healthy by consuming this product.
Yeah, and you turned me into a believer on it. It's an amazing product. I'm a consumer right now as well, and you and I have partnered on this. And if people want to go and learn about what JJ's doing, you can go check out peaksports.com/healthy at Peak Sports. And JJ, there's a video on there I guess they can watch and learn all about the benefits of. I'm a big believer in terms of looking at the athlete from a holistic, not a holistic, but a multidimensional. In other words, you got to have good fitness, you got to have good coaching, you have to have a good mental game. And what most people don't consider is the nutritional part. You have to have good nutrition, and I think this could be a part of an athlete's nutritional program. Do you think?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I'm in the same mindset as you. I'm always, even as a post-athlete, I still work out. I'm very health conscious, and consuming natural, clean foods has always been a priority. And there's so much information out there, the importance of consuming foods high in antioxidants and flavonoids, and it was why I gravitated towards this product, because it's a natural product. It's not your typical chocolate. It's more of a functional food, and there's some amazing studies out there on the health benefits of dark chocolate, and I've experienced them from whether it's a training standpoint, a recovery standpoint. I mean, the list goes on, but nutrition, very, very important for athletes.
Okay, I'm going to try to get a poll going here, but what I want people to think about is, where does pressure really come from? And maybe you could talk a little bit about that while I get the poll going. Okay.
Yeah, pressure, pressure obviously comes from within, and it also comes from your surroundings. It's unfortunate, but it's a natural part of the component as an athlete. There's pressure to perform, there's pressure to do your best, there's so many components involved, and it's a key element in an athlete's ability to be successful. whether they can handle the pressure, whether they can ignore the pressure, and whether they can focus on the goal at hand. So just through my years of experience, I've seen some athletes do very well with it, and I've seen some that have kind of failed and struggled with it.
Okay, so I've got the poll out. Can you see the poll, JJ? Is it up?
Yes, I can.
Okay, so if you just take a second and fill that out, and we'll see if we can get some responses from the audience.
All right.
Great. So 72% says it comes from both.
Yeah.
It comes from within the athlete, him or herself, and it comes from outside sources such as playing the big game or playing. But remember, I want everyone to know, okay, the most important thing you have to understand is that pressure is primarily the expectations that you're feeling to succeed in the game or in the competition. So keep that in mind. It can be triggered, right, JJ, by the big game, playing well for teammates, playing well for scouts, playing well for your parents. Those outside sources can trigger it, but it's ultimately how the athlete interprets it and the expectations the athlete's feeling about that. If scouts are watching, you know the scouts are watching you, and you're feeling this intense pressure, that's your interpretation of that outside source. Would you agree with that, JJ?
Oh yeah, absolutely, absolutely, and there's so many different things that are going to affect your level of pressure. Like you said, it could be, it could be making the big play. It could be those that are monitoring you, whether it's your family, whether it's the media, whether it's your teammates. I mean, it comes from so many different perspectives. But our ability to focus, obviously, is the key that's connected to our success.
Yeah. So let's talk about some of the feelings that you felt. You said you were a small player and you felt like your job was on the line all the time. Can you talk about some of the pressure that you felt each and every game to be at your best?
Yeah, I was under an extreme amount of pressure. All players at that level. You're playing at the highest level, one of the most popular sports worldwide. But me, 5'10", I was 160 pounds, smallest player in the league, and I can recall my fourth year, I had a really big game against the Raiders. Big game, and I remember the coach saying, next year we're going to start you, and I thought, well, I'm not trying to be a starter, but I went into camp as a starter, and the pressure that came on was unbelievable because not only was I obviously expected to perform all the time, but I always kind of got the feeling that they wanted a taller receiver to start. They wanted a bigger receiver, a taller receiver, and make me that third guy. So I was constantly concerned with every play, how it would do, don't give them a reason to replace me and just always looking over my shoulder. And it was really tough for me, Doc. I tell you, before every game, my wife laughs at this, but every game I would just puke on the sideline at the opening kickoff because I knew it was time to perform and I got to make a minimum amount of mistakes as possible.
Did you get a nickname?
Oh, no, but it was interesting because when I would do it at pregame or in pregame, you get some new guy on the team and they're like, hey, something's wrong with JJ, and they say, oh no, that's just him doing his pregame ritual. He's fine,
So, and I want everybody to know that there's different types of jitters out there. When you have pregame jitters and you're feeling the anticipation and excitement, that's what you want. That's really what you want to feel. That's your body telling you, hey, you're ready to go for the competition or the game, as opposed to fear of failure is a much different source of pressure. You're feeling more like, I don't want to mess up. I don't want to screw up. I don't want to let my teammates down. That carries more into the game, into a fear of making mistakes during the game, and that will paralyze your focus. You'll be focused on what not to do when you're out there. So the key is if you have the pregame jitters, that's great. You want to embrace that and say that I'm ready. On the other hand, if it's more of a fear of failure, then you're going to have to deal with that specific fear in order to unlock that focus. Because it can paralyze you. I was just talking with one of my students today, JJ, who happens to be a golfer. He's out there, and he made a triple on the third hole. He was going along great, birdie, birdie, triple, boom. And now he's got this fear of the big number. And so he's looking, his focus is on, don't hit it there, don't hit it there, that's a bogey there, that's a double there. He was paralyzed by this fear of not making mistakes. And so it's focus and your concentration doesn't exist in a vacuum. It very much is influenced by your perception of the pressure that you're feeling, the expectations that you're feeling to excel or to be great or to be perfect. Like perfectionists have a lot of baggage really when they go perform because they're trying to be so perfect and trying not to make mistakes, and it's just the wrong focus to have. So obviously we've talked about how important focus is. It's a huge mental skill. I would say next to confidence, your focus and where you put your focus and your ability to get that zone focus would be second to confidence. But if you have confidence, JJ, I think, I call it the cure-all in sports psychology. If you have the confidence, it's a lot easier to focus on the right stuff as opposed to if you go into the competition doubting.
Yeah.
Agree.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, when you have the confidence and you believe in what you're about to do and you know you can get it done, and if it's strong enough, there's no distraction or no fear that can penetrate that because you know you can get it done. It's just a matter of you doing it. And I can just remember different phases of my career, different phases of games where, you know, you're having a great game, you're catching the ball, whatever, you just got a high confidence. It's just like, give me the ball so I can go do the job, you know.
It's really easier to focus on the right stuff, isn't it? When you have that confidence, it allows you to focus on the ball. It allows you to focus on the task. And those are some of the things that we're going to talk about tonight. If you could address that for a minute about focusing on the task, I'm going to crank up poll number 2 for a second.
Okay, yeah. Yeah, focusing on the task is so important because obviously no matter what sport, whatever activity you're in, there's a goal. There's something you're trying to achieve, and you got to have that locked in laser focus on that goal, on that task, so ultimately there's nothing that can stop you from achieving it. Now, obviously there's different ways to be able to achieve such, you know, mental focus, but for me it was always preparation or just making sure that I studied my plays, make sure I ran the routes correctly, I knew what I needed to do, and if I had a nice little pregame warm-up and so forth, I was more focused on the task at hand.
So do you think pressure comes from worrying about results? We have another poll up for you. Does it come from worrying about results, outcomes, or how well you'll perform? Yes, no, or sometimes. We'll give you just a minute to do this, to complete the poll. I don't want to influence anybody, but remember, pressure is very specific to individuals themselves. And I see we just maxed out, we're maxing out our number of attendees. For those of you that can't get in, we'll, or haven't been able to get in, they're not here, we'll certainly try to get the recording up for everybody to listen to. So let's go close out the poll and see how we did.
You there, Doc? I lost you. Testing, 1, 2, 3.
Welcome to GoToWebinar. Webinar made easy. Please enter your access code followed by the pound or hash sign. To enable audio controls, please enter your audio PIN followed by the pound or hash sign. If you do not have a PIN, just press pound or hash.
You there, Doc?
JJ? Hey, JJ? I'm going to try to switch the mic and speakers. JJ? JJ?
Yeah, I'm there, Doc.
JJ?
Okay, good.
Yeah, I'm
Okay,
there.
good. All right. We had some temporary problem there. All right, so let's get to the meat of this. Let's get to the 4 steps to focusing under pressure. Number 1 is the mental and physical preparation you do, your pregame routine, having that laser focus, and finally 4 is the ability to refocus when necessary. Let's go through each of these. JJ, could you talk to the fact about how you went about mentally preparing for games?
Yeah, we spent, this was probably the surprise for me in the NFL, just how much time we spent on the mental preparation, how much we had to know as players, and in particular football players, how much just studying we had to do. I mean, just, there's 7 days, obviously, in the week, and every day we were doing some type of, studying of plays and watching films, and you spend 2, 3, 4, 5 hours during the day, studying opponents and studying plays, and then you go back home in the evening, take your playbook, study the play some more, watch some more game film, and really focusing on your opponents. But that was so key to performing on Sunday. You've got to know your plays, you got to know what to do and when to do it and when to make those adjustments.
Yeah, another part of this, the mental preparation and getting ready to focus, is to be able to prepare yourself mentally to cope with mistakes. Like, JJ, if you go out there and you're thinking, well, I got to have the perfect game, and then you drop a couple of balls and you're not prepared to deal with those drops, then your focus is going to really suffer because you're going to be dwelling on the drops, obviously. So I put it under the heading of being able to anticipate and cope. And all the game films that you watched and all the things, the visualization, the mental preparation that you did, I would imagine part of that was to be able to anticipate anything that can happen out there, how you're going to run your routes, how people are going to handle you, how the defenders are going to handle you, going through your mind, just like a batter would go through his mind on what the pitcher's going to throw at him or her. So do you feel like it was at that level for you where you're trying to anticipate everything?
Yeah, I mean, you tried. It was interesting because I remember studying, you know, the night before and all the way up into the game. And I remember I having my wife, you know, run through the plays with me, and I tried to just prepare myself as much from a mental aspect to eliminate potential mistakes from a play standpoint. But the drop balls and the hits and all that, those were things you could not, you know, you couldn't dictate. So you knew something was going to happen, some kind of adversity, some kind of error, and you kind of mentally prepared that when it happens, you know it's going to happen, but you just got to move on and refocus.
And we're also talking about pregame routines, I think. The step number 2 is, in order to focus your best, you have to have a transition between what's going on in your life that day and your sport. It's really, really important to have that pregame routine, pre-competition routine, whatever, pre-swim routine, whatever you want to call it. It's critical that you use that time to get into that focused state of mind. And what I suggest to my students is I have them go through a few steps about during their pregame routine to get them into a confident and a focused state of mind. The first one being, for example, is to try and let go of those expectations you're feeling to win or to be perfect or to impress a parent or to impress your teammates. Whatever those expectations are, note those, try to let those go, and decide that you're going to focus more on the execution and the process. Remember earlier, 85% of the people said that a lot of the pressure they feel is about results, worrying about results, outcomes, how well they're going to perform. So for me, it's very important for you to get oriented towards focusing your mind on execution and the process. Now, that doesn't mean getting all mechanical and technical with yourself. All that means is you're going to set some small goals, like, JJ, in your case, in football, it may be to just lock in on that ball and follow that ball all the way into your hands, which is just rudimentary for you, I'm certain, and automatic for you. For the golfer, it's to pick a good target and commit to the target. For the swimmer, it's to have a race plan of how they're going to go out, out of the blocks, and what their plan is going to be in terms of their pacing, for example. So always go back in your pregame routine and decide, what is it that I need to focus on in the process? And I call those mini goals, or I call those process goals with the students that I coach, to help them get geared towards the process and away from the outcome. Because in my mind, JJ, the only way to get away from focusing on the outcome is to orient yourself towards what you need to focus on, and that is, how are you going to execute each play, each shot, each run, each race to the best of your ability, one at a time. And to me, that's the key for helping you deal with, some of these thoughts about the end of the performance that's creating that pressure and taking your focus away from the moment. One of the things that I wanted to mention is sometimes athletes will get into their pregame routine or their warm-up and it doesn't go according to plan. And in that case, you certainly don't want to panic and you certainly don't want to lose. I think it can affect your focus, it can affect your confidence, it can affect your composure. So please, in your warm-up routine, if it doesn't go perfect, if you can't do your whole routine, don't panic and say that the game is not going to be good. What I tell my students is, look, once you get in the game, the adrenaline, the shot of adrenaline that you get will help you focus better in the game, and you'll probably do better. A lot of my golf students, for example, they struggle on the range in their warm-up, and then they start to question whether they're going to play well or not. And I tell them, look, blow it off. Once you get in competition, your focus is going to be there. You're going to have more adrenaline, and it'll be easier for you to really get into that flow. So don't panic about that warm-up routine. I love what you talk about, JJ, in terms of the snapping clear. Could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that was something that was, taught to us by Frank Gantz, who was a special teams coach in Atlanta, and he kind of drilled this in our head about one snap and clear, meaning that when you have a play, the whistle, obviously you have the play, no matter what happens, whether it's a good play, a bad play, or whatever, when the whistle blows, that play's over. It's one snap at a time, and then you clear it. You clear it, and you go to the next play. And this was really good. It helped me to kind of block out, that last play, because sometimes, plays don't go the way you want. There might be an error or you did something wrong, and those that would dwell on it, I would see how it would affect them on the next play. So I always kept that thought in my mind, one snap clear, and it really helped me to concentrate on the next play.
So we're talking about step 3, have a laser focus on a specific goal. It could be a specific target. It could be just seeing the ball well if you're a hitter, for example. It could be if you're a golfer, you're just thinking about the target, for example. And I love the analogy that you did with when you were running hurdles and what you did when you were running hurdles. Can you talk a little bit about that, about the relationship between your performance and the ability to have that clear, specific goal?
Yeah, I loved running the hurdles. I mean, the hurdles was, I thought it was ideal for me because I was a sprinter and a jumper. It was a good fit for me. But what I enjoyed the most, there was such a challenge in running the hurdles. I mean, you had 10 hurdles that you had to get over, and then you had, 7 competitors that you were running with. And so whenever I had the ability to look at the end, see the finish line, and then when the race would start, patiently take each hurdle at a time, but lock in on that finish line. If I could really concentrate, I ran so much better in my college days. Now, the times when I, lost my concentration and I start looking to the left and looking to the right and I hear the other hurdlers banging the hurdles, it really negatively affects my performance. But locking in on that finish line really helped me to focus.
And Joe Montana, who you're very familiar with, arguably one of the best quarterbacks in all of football. Can you talk about why this guy was so good under pressure and his ability to focus?
Yeah, there's a couple things that impressed me about Joe. One is just his preparation. I remember when he came to KC, we ran the same offense they ran in San Francisco, and I can recall seeing him in the back studying the plays, and I thought, this guy's been around this offense for 15, 16 years, and he still studies it like it's the first time he's ever seen it. And so he would study, the formations and the whole plays to where he just had it down solid. The other thing that impressed me was that when he broke the huddle, he could scan the defense, and he already knew whether or not they were in the right play. Kind of like, I guess you could say, similar to what Peyton Manning and Brady do today, but then, and he would know right away, and he would know if they needed to go to another play and what play that was, that they could take advantage of the defense. And his ability to drop back and look safeties off it was amazing. He'd be looking left and take a 5-step drop, and on that 5th step, he'd immediately throw right, never giving the defense the chance to be able to get that pre-snap read. And he just, for a guy that we called Cool because he was so relaxed, the pressure didn't seem to get to him. I mean, that's what it appeared. And I can remember in a playoff game when we were playing against the Pittsburgh Steelers. It was the '93 season, and it was actually the year we went to the AFC Championship game. We were driving down the field. There was like 2 minutes or a minute left to go in the game, and we're right there on the 8. It's 4th down and goal, and the game's on the line. And I remember being so nervous, and Joe coming into the huddle cracked a joke. He cracked a joke, and I'm like, what is with this guy? But it just showed you that, hey, this guy's been there, done that. This doesn't faze him, and he just wanted to make sure we were all relaxed and ready to finish the game.
Great story. Great story. So for me, that laser focus, JJ, I talk about athletes need to understand what to focus on. It sounds so rudimentary. It sounds so basic, but I call those performance cues. We call them task-relevant performance cues. Know that what your role is and know the things that you need to focus on. You would be surprised at how many things come into your mind that really are irrelevant, that are distractions. So really for me the first step is define your role and what are the performance cues. What are the little things you need to focus on? If you're a batter, for example, you need to get prepared on deck. You need to time the pitcher. You need to get loose and ready to get in the batter's box. And then once you get in the batter's box, there's only a few cues in terms of your setup, maybe taking a practice swing and getting your focus narrowed in on the pitcher and having a plan at the plate. So those are some examples of what I call performance cues. Narrow those performance cues down to what's going to allow you to perform your best. And also understand your typical distractions. So, JJ, if you could put that into kind of running a typical play, what would be those cues for you, those small things that you'd have to focus on in order to execute that route?
Yeah, that's a great question. From the time that we get to play, right away you get to play and you're thinking of the play. You're thinking of the options, the other routes, the adjustments and all that. You break the huddle, you immediately get a peek at the DB. You want to see how he's playing. When you get to the line, then you scan to the safety. You got to see where the safeties are. Then your eyes come back on the linebacker to see if anybody's going to blitz. At the same time, you're peeking at the quarterback to make sure he's staying with the play and he doesn't change it. Once you know that he's going with that play, you got to look at the defense again to see what his technique is, and then you always got to wait for those blitz adjustments, because if there's a blitz, it just changes the entire play. So I shared this story with a friend of mine because they just think sometimes the receivers run up to the line and they just run down the field. No, there's a whole lot of, I guess as you say, performance cues that you got to be on top of in order for you to perform your duties. And if Joe changed the play, which he did a lot of times, then you got to go through this whole process again and make sure you run the correct play after it's been changed.
Yeah, it brings up an interesting question about focus. Is you can overthink about that role and really confuse yourself and slow yourself down in that process, right? If you're anticipating so much and then you forget about your route, I mean, you could certainly have a situation where your brain is on overload, right?
Yeah, I could remember that when I was a younger player, and just, you were so concerned about if they bring two defensive players, you got to change your route. And then sometimes, Doc, I would think I saw two, and I remember making a couple mistakes, and then it was just like you said, just over-focused to the point where, you weren't able to perform your duties properly.
We have some questions coming in. I'm sorry if I'm not getting to your questions right now. We wanted to get through the 4 steps and then go back to some of the questions that you have. Unfortunately, I have another, there's another computer that I'm running the system with, and that's where the questions are. So I'm kind of going back and forth between 2 systems, but we'll get to some of those questions. So hang on there. If you're inputting questions, we can't promise to get to them, but we'll try. So certainly, to me, it all culminates in this one skill that I call the ability to refocus quickly when necessary. I call it a top mental skill. When it comes to the focusing skills, whether you're worrying about the results, whether you're dwelling on a mistake, whether you're thinking about what a parent's thinking or what a teammate is thinking, you're too focused on what others are thinking, you have to be able to catch yourself, be aware of those distractions, and refocus. One of my mentors and good friend of mine, Dr. Ken at Cal State Fullerton, he says, look, let's face it, he studied peak experience in the zone and peak performance his whole life, and more lately, he's come to the conclusion and it says, look, really the zone is overrated. You're hardly ever into that zone. You may be 10, 20%. If you're lucky, you're going to be completely in that zone. Most of the time for athletes, it's about making subtle adjustments. And I think that's how I explain what sports psychology is, JJ, and for our audience. It's really about how can you mentally prepare to make small adjustments in your mind and your focus and in your confidence so that you can tweak it while you're out there. Because everybody feels the internal distractions, feels the external distractions as well, and can get off task. But the great athletes, and maybe you could tell a story about this, JJ. We don't really have anything queued up, but they're able to recognize, hey, I'm distracted right now. I'm thinking about the wrong stuff. I'm thinking about the end of the game and the result. It's making me tight. Like you said, I was on the line. I was nervous, you know. So the ability to adjust and to refocus, and I call that the 3 R's in my work. Recognize that you're focusing on the results or that you're still dwelling on the mistake. Regroup, tell yourself that's not important. And the final third and the most important step is to be able to refocus and get yourself back into the moment. This is a basic skill that I teach all my one-on-one students. They have to get past this. They have to get past letting go of expectations, and they have to get past or master, I should say, the ability to refocus and understanding what it means to focus on the process and focus on the execution. I can't stress this enough. But JJ, I'm sure you've been there, done that, where there's some external distractions or you got some internal distractions, and boy, you don't have time. If you're running a route, you don't have a lot of time to get your stuff together.
Yeah, you don't. And I have to admit, it was a tough game because you're playing like mental gymnastics for one thing with yourself. You're playing mental gymnastics against the guy that's going against you. I can remember, I'm playing against Deion Sanders, and I know this is probably the greatest cornerback in the world. And I am a little concerned, but I don't want him to know that. So I've got to try to mentally play at a level that, he doesn't see my weaknesses. And it's tough, But when I got to play with guys like Joe and Marcus Allen and who was Derek Thomas, to see these guys be able to refocus and stay focused on the goal at hand was just, it was always motivating, and they set very good examples for me as a young athlete.
Yeah, very, very critical. So let's just summarize, and you can throw in any other anecdotal stories that you have on it. But the 4 steps that JJ and I brainstormed on about helping you focus your best under the pressure is, number 1, be prepared mentally for anything. Do your homework. Do your physical preparation, certainly. Study your opponents if you're in a sport where you can study your opponents. And then do your mental preparation where you can anticipate where your focus might break down, or what, in what ways is it going to drift. What are your internal distractions? Know what your hot buttons are, and then have a strategy for how you're going to refocus, how you're going to get back focused on execution. And we also talked about number 2, having a pregame routine to start orienting yourself towards focusing on the process, not the outcome. Everybody on the call, everybody on the webinar agrees, almost everybody, more than 85% said that really the pressure that people feel is mostly about results and outcomes and worrying about the what-ifs. In that case, you have to make sure that you're focused on the right stuff. And the right stuff is, in your pregame routine, go over your roles, visualize what you're going to do, think about the process. Don't allow that mind to wander to the future. JJ talked about that laser focus on a specific goal when you're competing, whether it's catching that ball or whether it's getting to that finish line, to be able to narrow your focus down on a couple specific performance cues and go after those performance cues. Don't go overboard, as we talked about. Don't focus on too much or try to focus on too much, because then the mind is going to get clogged and it's going to actually slow you down. But pick out a couple important performance cues and get your laser focus. I call it become immersed into those cues. And then finally, have that ability to refocus when necessary. When you find that you're getting off track, use the 3 R's technique. Recognize, regroup, and refocus. Recognize, regroup, tell yourself that's not important, and then refocus back on the task. Very, very critical to do that on the fly, or if you're in a self-paced task like someone that's serving in tennis or a pitch at baseball, golf shot for certain, you can stop your routine, You can start your routine over and get your mindset back into where it needs to go. So I call it my two different types of refocusing. Refocus on the fly, or restart your routine. Stop and restart if you can do an earlier stage of your serve or your shot or whatever it may be. So those are the 4 steps. I'm going to take a look, JJ, if you could kind of wrap up and talk a little bit about maybe we didn't get to this in the beginning, but maybe if you could talk about the advantages of how does focus tie in with chocolate and antioxidants. You know, you'd think it's like it's a long haul there, but if you could talk about that, I'm going to grab a couple of the questions and come back with some questions for you in a second.
Yeah, sure will. Yeah, what's interesting about chocolate is especially the fact that it has an amazing history. I mean, many people don't know the medicinal benefits of dark chocolate that was discovered 3,500 years ago. And as we know, chocolate candy would process. The particular product that I consume is high antioxidants, natural. There's some great studies that show the benefits of consuming foods that are high in antioxidants, such as, you know, there's omegas in our products. There's studies show that your blood flow is increased as you're consuming a dark chocolate product, which actually helps you with mental focus, you know, because you're getting more blood flow into your brain, so it actually helps you with mental focus, mental clarity, helping you avoid kind of that mental fatigue or being cognitively impaired, as I've noticed as I train with it. But yeah, consuming products like this are important to me where I get some other advantage that I can, you know, allow me to continue to perform at whatever level I want.
One question that came out early, which is a really good one. If bad pregame routines are to be ignored, what's the benefit of having a pregame routine and having confidence carry over into your performance? So, and I'm not really saying bad pregame routines need to be ignored. Let me clear that up a little bit. What I meant is some of the perfectionist athletes that I work with, they go into their pregame warm-up and they want all their ducks in order. And JJ, maybe you can come up with some examples of players that you've seen do this, because partly to get to the professional level, you have to have some perfectionism. It's the downside of that perfectionism where you go into the game situation and you're thinking, well, you know, I got to catch everything in my warm-up, or my runs have to be perfect, or all my shots on the range have to be great. And I see this over and over where athletes, they get hung up on it, and then they start to question and doubt their ability. All I'm saying is do not allow those type of belief systems, I have to have a perfect warm-up, impact how you're going to feel, you know, at the start of the game. That's an error that you may make. And JJ, if you could maybe talk about that for a second as well.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, pregame warm-up is very important for multiple reasons. Unfortunately, I worked with athletes at times that, as a wide receiver, that if they didn't catch every ball in the pregame warm-up, their brains were rattled when it was time for the game to start, and it really affected their performance. One of the things I always try to do, which we've already kind of covered, is that, you know, I tried to have a great pregame warm-up because, it kind of boosts my confidence going into the game, but I recognize that it's not always going to be perfect. I'm going to make some mistakes. That's okay. But despite that, I'm still ready to play when it's game time, because at the end of the day, I have prepared ahead of time, and the pregame warm-up is just part of the process.
Another question that we're getting from our participants, and this is very, very common, what exercises practice off the field or off the course to improve concentration? Now, it depends upon who you ask. From my perspective, from a sports psychology perspective, I would say, to me, athletes know how to concentrate. They're pretty, unless you have ADD, or something, most athletes are good at concentration. What often happens is athletes' concentration gets displaced, which means it gets focused on the irrelevant stuff, the worrying, the results, like we talked about, focusing too much on that last blown play or whatever it may be. So the key in terms of the off practice practice on your mental game is, number one, you have to do it on the practice field, and number two, you can practice things like refocusing at home or while you're reading or while you're driving. You know, any time where you sense that you're losing focus, you can practice that refocusing skill. But I don't use concentration grids. I don't use any of that. One technique or one strategy that I would suggest is, if you can the longer you can mentally rehearse or visualize your performance, more likely the better your focus is without getting distracted. When I was at Cal State Fullerton, we used to have the gymnasts try and mentally rehearse their entire routine without other thoughts coming into play. And you try that. Go through a 2-minute, you know, or a 1.5-minute balance beam routine without your mind, you know, wandering to something else where you're just trying to mentally rehearse it. It's really, really tough. So one exercise could be the mental rehearsal, but for me, it's all about being able to understand that it's about refocusing and practicing those refocusing skills while you're off the field. Would you add to that, JJ? Or?
Yeah, I'd probably add, you know, specifically for me, being a wide receiver, my job was to catch the ball. I mean, that was my job. And if I lacked any confidence or felt I wasn't mentally prepared or whatever, I would catch as many balls as I could. Practice time, game, on the sideline, because I noticed that if I caught a lot of balls and I felt really good about that, then I didn't have to think about that so much when it was time to play. I could focus on the route, the depth, you know, the assignments and so forth. So yeah, that was the thing that kind of helped me refocus, is just, you know, catch a lot of balls so you don't have to worry about catching the ball at game time.
Another great question that came in recently. If you're losing, your team is losing at halftime, and I'll let you answer this one, JJ. You're behind in the game, you're losing at halftime. How do you come out in the second half and get refocused to do your job?
Well, I would probably say, you know, you always got to believe you can win. I mean, halftime, no matter what the score is, you've always got to believe you can win. Because if you have doubt and you don't think you can win, your performance it's going to be evident as you play in the second half. And so I can think of many opportunities when we were down at halftime, but as long as there was 30 minutes left in that game, we felt that we could win. So when we went out there, we started from play one and just tried our best to execute each play as best as we could until we get to the point where we had multiple successful plays, and then you start seeing the score go our way. I can think of times when it was the opposite. I'm going to give you an example. I remember when we were playing in the AFC Championship game. We were feeling really good. We beat Houston on the road. We beat Pittsburgh. We're playing Buffalo in Buffalo. And Buffalo goes down and they score. And then we come back and we score. And then we stop Buffalo, marching down to score right before halftime. Joe Montana throws a pass. The guy drops it in the end zone. The next play, Joe got knocked out of the game. And I remember what happened at that point. Many of the players felt they could not win without Joe. And I was so frustrated because I had like 8 catches that game, and I was like, we can still do this. But if all the team ain't on the same page, you're not going to get the desired results.
And I would add to that, you know, you never know what's going to happen. You can't anticipate the second half of a game. I see it in tennis all the time where someone will lose a first set, but then they can come back and they can win the second set, or vice versa. They win a first set and they can come back and do well. You know, for example, I've seen my daughter go 6-1 just playing beautifully, lose a second set because of the loss of momentum. She can lose that second set. So you want to know that as the underdog, if you're losing, that anything can happen. And then I would say really is I like the idea of put that first half behind you. Put that first half behind you and go out there in that second half like it's a new half It's a new start of the game, and you're going to go out and execute. Because if you go out there and you're thinking we're down 14-0, you're going to perform differently if you go out there and you say, new start of the game, let's go. And once again, focus on your job and don't attach that significance that you're out there in the second half and you're a losing team at that point, because that's going to drag your confidence down, and that's going to cause you to focus on the wrong things. I do want to mention before we get off that we're going to have 2 more webinars this month, probably around the same time. You could certainly email me at patrick@peaksports.com some ideal times. I probably should have done a poll here at the end of the webinar to find out what are some ideal times. I haven't decided whether I'm going to open them up to the public like this or whether they're going to be member-only webinars. I usually reserve these for my members at peaksports.com or at kidsportspsychology.com. And but I decided to open it up and give everyone a kind of feel for how we do the teleseminars. This is new format. This webinar format is a new format for us. But I really appreciate JJ coming on and telling these great stories related to the mental game and the great players that he played with and how he managed to overcome, some of the challenges that he had being a small player. Once again, if you want to partner with JJ and myself, I've partnered with JJ. I'm really into this. It's a little off topic, but I think it's important to start looking at the nutritional aspects for your athletes or for yourself. Go and check it out. I didn't hear what JJ said earlier about it, but go to peaksports.com/healthy and check out what all the buzz is about. I'm a consumer. I'm a believer myself in the holistic approach, being healthy all around with the mental game, the physical game, the nutritional game. Very, very important. And this is one way to do it. JJ, I really appreciate you on the webinar tonight. I hope I can twist your arm and get you back for the other webinars this fall. So hopefully we can get you on again.
Yeah, absolutely. And I got to give you your props, Doc. This is some good. I'm sitting there thinking like, wow, I wish I knew you when I was playing. You could have given me some tips definitely to continue to learn how to focus at the highest level. So thanks for having me on.
Oh, I appreciate it. And everybody, thanks for attending once again. We're going to put up the recording, hopefully. If that turns out well, we'll put up the recording and everybody can access it that couldn't get on. All right, good night, everybody. We'll see you next week. It should be around the same time, but I'll send you an email. So stay tuned for our next webinars. Bye now.